You're listening to Key Conversations for Leaders. This is episode number 21. Welcome, everybody. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about establishing boundaries and avoiding burnout with Faheem Moosa. In this episode, we're going to be talking about overcoming the challenges of leading a remote team, the need for over-communication, and why we sometimes need to leave the feelings at home and just go to work, even if you work at home, and much, much more. It's the simple things that we do every day that determines our success. It's the routines, the rituals, the little decisions that we make, and the conversations that we have on a daily basis that build on each other to create momentum towards our vision. That's what this show is about, better conversations for better leaders. Hey everybody, and welcome to Key Conversations for Leaders. I'm your host, John Ryan, and today we have a very special guest, Faheem Moosa. Faheem is the founder of Springboarders Management Consulting. He began his career in the manufacturing industry. After completing his MBA in 2007, he began working as a strategy consultant in Toronto and served a wide range of companies, including those in the Fortune 100. In 2009, he struck out on his own and started a consulting practice, helping small and mid-sized companies grow their businesses. He has since shifted his focus to helping independent consultants and boutique firms build a sales pipeline and grow their business as a leader of leaders. Welcome to the show, Faheem.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Faheem, you've been working remotely as a management consultant since 2009. What was it that made you decide to go remote instead of working on site?
Well, that's a good question. It all happened by accident. My first management consulting gig for my own practice was with a university. And so I had that gig, and then I was looking for another gig. And when I found that second gig, it was for a virtual customer service and sales company. And they'd been working virtually, so then their style was working virtually. And that's how I started, consulting remotely. It was funny because I still remember that it was a new concept for me. And, I was being trained by them as to how to work virtually. And I had to go, buy a speakerphone because I didn't have one. Because, back in the day, you had to, call the conference line and then get on meetings and everything. I mean, there was no, technology like this, like we're on right now, Zoom. So that's how I got into it.
A lot of companies these days are obviously shifting to remote because of the pandemic that we're in right now, the global situation that we're facing. And many companies who have never done that and maybe thought that it couldn't work. And you've been doing it for 11 years.
Yeah.
And now they're starting to do that. What is it that companies need to be thinking about as they go to maybe more hybrid or even more completely virtual teams?
I think what I found really works with the remote teams is you need to over communicate. What happens when you work remote is that especially when you're used to working with people around you in an office setting, is that communication, it happens. It's much easier. But when you get to a remote setting, what happens is you get to you obviously don't have that face-to-face connect. When I say face-to-face, it's like it's a human-to-human connection because you're so far away, even if you're using video. So what happens is that you tend to miss the nuances with in terms of communication, and sometimes there are issues related to that. So when companies are when they want to go remote, I feel that they need to sort of be mindful of the fact that communication can get challenging, and you need to over communicate a lot to your team. So that's the first thing. That's the big idea, and everything the technology and all that stuff flows from that. So the big piece is communication.
So really over communicating, and what happens when they're not over communicating? What have you seen or experienced?
Well, things can go, things can be taken the wrong way. Typically, when you send out emails, for example, the tone is missing from emails, right? There's written communication can be very clear, yes, but tone is missing. So sometimes people may take it badly, or they might have some kind of, they might think that the intent of the email was something else. So that is, that happens when you don't communicate. That happens when typically in a remote setting, even if and typically when you're using a system like Basecamp or Slack, for example, everything is like written and in chat and all that. So that can go awry sometimes if you're not careful.
So the tone gets missing and therefore there's miscommunication that can happen in that regard. Is there such a thing as over communicating? Can you do it too much?
No, I think you can. I don't think you can do it too much. I mean, that's my personal experience. And when I say over communicating, I'm not saying that, keep annoying people with more and more emails. I'm just saying that, try and be as clear as possible. Or if you feel that, if you reread your email, for example, and you feel that you could have communicated it in a better way, then, send a voicemail, for example. I'll give you an example. Back in the day, I had a client that, there were a couple of deliverables that I had to, provide, and and the client and I had, every person has his or her own preference in terms of communicating what tools. Some people like email. Some people, just don't like to talk, and some people like talking on the phone. And this particular client didn't like talking on the phone, but he liked leaving voicemails. Okay, so he had a habit of working late at night and leaving voicemails, and because of that, there were a couple of things that, just to make a long story short, there was a bit of miscommunication over there, and so a couple of deliverables were lost in the maze or in so of those voicemails back and forth. So this was getting a little tedious for me. So in one of those voicemails, I said that, look, we need to talk, right? And we need to. There are these couple of points we've gone back and forth, many times, but this is something that may lead to more confusion. So let's just get on the phone. Let's put it in the calendar and let's talk. So that's an example of over communicating, like saying something when you really want to say it, right? And not holding back because you anticipate that this might become a larger issue.
So I'm hearing a couple things. One, that over communication really is just being vigilant about communication. Yes. That you can certainly under communicate and you can have unnecessary details in communication too, but finding that sweet spot and being intentional about what is the best form of communication for this. Is this text? Is this email? Is this a phone call, video, yes, or even in some cases a voicemail to make that happen? So if my preference is phone, and the other person's preference is text or voicemail in that one situation, do I have to be flexible and communicating in the way that they want to communicate, or do they have to be flexible and communicating the way that I want to communicate? How do you navigate those types of things?
So it depends on, for me, I'll tell you, because I'm a consultant and I just mirror the client, right? If like right now, just before getting on the call with you, I was texting a client, and that particular client likes the text. Okay, and that's how they feel it's important. I mirror the client, so I start with that. But if I feel that there's something that I need to communicate and I can't get it through via text, now my preference of communication while working remotely is through video. I use a bunch of different video tools which we can get into later on. But if I have to say something, or specifically if I have to show something, then I get on video, I record my screen, I do a screen share, and I send that information because I feel that with all the tools that we have, and especially with the kind of consulting I do, like I help consultants to grow their pipeline. So there are tools, very different types of software that we use. Sometimes I have to take my clients through that and make sure that they're using the features properly. So if I feel that they need more than just a simple text, I would just hop on video and I would text them saying that, hey, I've sent you an email, go check it out. So, but to answer your question, I mean, it totally depends, on what the relationship is with the individual. if it's a coworker, I'm comfortable. I'm so comfortable with remote and communication right now that I can even mirror a coworker. I don't have to, just because it's I'm a colleague. I don't expect the other person to. I don't expect the other person to sort of follow my style. If a coworker is or a colleague is comfortable with text or even the phone, I would just mirror that. I don't mind. I mean, as long as because the larger picture here is that I don't want any miscommunication, and that which we've discussed can so easily happen.
Absolutely. What are some of the mindset changes that you think can help people when they move from, working on site to working remotely?
Um, I'll answer this from a consultant's perspective. Like, if you're a consultant or if you're working independently, and you're working remotely, I would say that there's a tendency to feel less worthy just because you're serving clients remotely or just because you're doing something remotely. So if you're a consultant or if you're even if you're working in a firm and you're dealing with customers, don't feel less worthy just because you're serving clients remotely. Um, so especially when you're a consultant, your value is a function of the result that you get for your clients. Or even when you're working for a company, for example, your value is the result that you get for the company or your boss. So that's a mindset shift. I mean, nothing changes when you're working remotely. You're expected to deliver whatever you're expected to deliver. But then there is a tendency of thinking that, oh, you know what, it's remote, so maybe it's not as good as the real thing. I mean, there's no such thing as real thing. The only real thing, if there is such a thing, is the result that you get for whatever work you're doing. So that's the first mindset piece, if you will. And secondly, when you're working remotely, I found it really useful to have a routine. When you're working in an office, for example, there is typically a routine. Like, you have to wake up, go to the office, commute, there's a specific time, etc. It's important that structure helps in a way. So when you're working remotely, typically if you're working at home, in the times we're in right now, it helps to have a routine. It helps to have a start time. It helps to have a specific time when you have lunch, for example, or you schedule some breaks. And it is still it is a theoretical concept. I mean, you're still at home, but then even if you sort of make it work like 60 to 70% of the time, that you have a routine, it definitely helps you in your work. But here's the thing: in terms of mindset, the biggest thing I'll tell you is that if you enjoy what you're doing, I really enjoy my work. So if you enjoy what you're doing, remote or in person doesn't matter. In terms of a mindset, a perspective, there's not a lot that you will need to do if you really enjoy the people that you're working with, or you enjoy the results that you're getting for your clients or any constituents. So that's what I would say. I mean, make sure that you enjoy what you're doing, and make sure that you're in a place where you enjoy the work.
So three things I'm kind of picking up here. One is, as you said, focus on the results. It doesn't matter, unless you're doing massage therapy. There's no more real in person versus being virtually, because you're not touching your coworkers,
Yeah.
right? You're working with them, and you have all the tools on the planet right now to be productive and communicate, like you said. Set that routine, and even if you don't follow it 100%, having that structure, 60-70% is still better than 0%, I
Yes.
suppose. And make sure it's something that's passionate, something that you're actually finding fulfillment in to keep you engaged. Because I'm so glad you brought in the routine, by the way, because when you shift from being an employee mindset to an entrepreneurial mindset, which is I think what a lot of team members are having to do right now, is if you're in your own office by yourself, there's no one else around to tell you need to work. It's all self-managed. that if you don't have that routine, you can be working all the time or working very little. How do you manage like productivity and avoiding burnout? And because you've been doing this for over a decade now.
So, I manage my time around my clients and my kids. So back in the day when I started the business, it was 2009. I was single. So, I realized that my energy levels were really up in the mornings. So I got a lot of work done early in the morning. And, after a quick workout, I scheduled all my client calls early in the morning. And when you work remotely, I have a lot of calls because that's the only way, you communicate with me, with clients. And, if you deliver coaching programs or training programs or consulting. So all my client calls scheduled in the morning. And but that kind of changed when, I got married and I got kids. And especially when the kids started growing up, I had to drop them to school, get them ready, and my wife and I would take turns doing that. But so when it was my turn, I couldn't follow the same schedule, right? So then what I did was I started working a little later in the morning, and this is the best thing about working remotely and working independently. It gives you discretionary time, it gives you freedom, so I could sort of mold my day depending on based on my family time and based on what was important personally. So in terms of managing my time, it always sort of was done around my clients and my kids now lately. In terms of burnout, so here's the thing. I mean, sometimes, and most of the time, client work can be challenging. In my business, for me, results are super important. I make sure that my clients get results. So if I have to put in some extra hours and get the work done, then so be it. And sometimes, yes, it's challenging. I'm not going to paint a rosy picture on what my consulting is and what the type of work I do. Sometimes it gets challenging because you don't plan for certain things to happen, and then there's there are deadlines. You need to if you've right now I create a lot of content for clients, and they have to go out at a certain time. So it does get a bit challenging. So the way I sort of manage burnout is to make sure that I have a team that takes care of administrative work and certain things that I'm not required to do. Right? I think that is super important. Uh, for example, right now, like I mentioned, I create a lot of content, and there's a lot of ideation involved. There's creating that content and shooting videos, for example. That stuff only I can do, right? I can't outsource that, so I focus on that and make sure that any administrative tasks over and above all of that are outsourced. Because if I take everything on, then I'll definitely face burnout. So making sure, so understanding what's required for you to do and what's required and what you can sort of outsource, that is key. So if someone's in the same boat, I would recommend just writing down all the tasks that you are doing currently, and then circling tasks that that only you can do, and then figuring out the rest of the tasks. Figure out what you can outsource and what you can build a small team. And it doesn't mean that you need to spend a lot of money doing that. There are so many avenues where you can spend a couple of $100 and buy productivity, for lack of a better term. Yeah, so that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I think that adage of only do the things that you're uniquely qualified to do, and keeping that principle in mind, because it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing. Because if you're doing the videos, and like we talked about even before the show, the post-production and the marketing and all these other things, then you don't have the energy for the ideation, which is really where your value add and your genius comes through. Are there any tips or suggestions that you have for leaders who are struggling managing their team from a distance?
So that would depend on what the struggle is, right? So let's assume that yes, their teams are not engaged, or they're struggling with with motivation. So I would again go back to the what we talked about earlier, just over communicate and just have a real open conversation with the team about what the struggle is, and um, try and figure out a path to addressing that. So yeah, I mean, communicating over and above what is required, anticipating um, issues, or anticipate. Let's say there's a conflict between a couple of team members. Then what would you do offline that you can now do online? Maybe you talk to people, one on one, and try and resolve or manage conflict. That happens a lot. I mean, that's it is a bit challenging when you're trying to do that in a remote setting. But yeah, I think it all comes down to communication. And at the end of the day, I think that communication, whether you're working remotely or whether you're working on site, communication can resolve a lot of conflict. Can resolve a lot of problems. And when I say communication, I mean leadership. I mean negotiation, persuasion, listening, empathy. All that comes under communication. And whether you're working on site or whether you're working remotely, all those things matter. And they matter much more when you work remotely because of the issues that we talked about, the lack of tone and the increase in distance, and so on and so forth. So I think that is what I would say in terms for leaders who are struggling with their remote team. And the other thing is, and this the team that I worked with, the first client that I mentioned, the virtual sales and customer service organization, they used to do a really nice. They used to have a nice way of making sure that they maintain the the human touch and the connection. But that was a unique situation where all the members of their organization, they worked nearby, which is in the province of Ontario here, so in different cities. So that the team was spread out, and every once in a while, a couple of months, we would all get together and have like an offsite, or just get together at a restaurant or whatever, and connect and chat. So that's a nice touch. If you're able to do that, then you must, because again, bringing that human connection is so important. But if you're not able to do that, let's say your remote team is spread out across the world, don't just have a virtual meeting where you have 20 different people on a Zoom call, for example, and just because they're all spread across the world, that doesn't translate. A meeting of 20 people in a live setting is different from a meeting with 20 people in a Zoom setting. Even if it's 20 people and you're meeting, person to person, in person, people can talk to one another individually in that group itself, like get together and talk. But in a Zoom setting or a virtual setting, you can't do that. Like there'll be one person talking, and there'll be a few people who are just silent. So if you have a remote team that's spread out, then I would encourage more one-on-one communication, because then you can sort of really get to know the person and get to know what the issues are between if there's any conflict resolution that you have to do, and so on and so forth. So I think the overarching idea is to simply get together with people and again, empathize, communicate, listen, learn, and be honest and open, whether uh, whether your team is nearby or whether your team is spread out across the globe.
It's a really interesting point that you have, that when you're in that live setting. So if your remote team under normal circumstances, get together as frequently as you can to have that human interaction, because the team bonding is not when you're sitting in the lecture or the presentation. The team bonding is before the event, on the breaks, while you're
Yes,
grabbing food at the buffet, right? It's
absolutely.
those
Yeah.
types of things, and networking that doesn't happen on that Zoom meeting, and maybe we're exploring things that we're trying to figure out right now in this world, but is there a way to capture that in the digital world? The one-on-one I get, but I feel like as a leader, I'm going to connect with you and you connect with me, but the cross-team connection, like, can that be achieved? Or is that really just the thing we're trying to figure out right now?
Well, I don't know if you can really replace the in-person connection. I'm not sure.
I'm putting you on the spot to solve the world's problems right now.
Well, you give me some you know telepathic technology, or something like that, or a better technology with holograms and augmented reality, to have
Sure,
the person
we're
sitting
almost
next to
there.
you through something. Then maybe we can get closer. But the closest thing we have is video right now. And like you said, it's even if it's a large setting. I mean, it's that in between time that you miss. But with more one-on-ones, you can, that's the closest you can get. And still, it's not fully, it's not the same. It'll never be the same. I mean, we shouldn't try and replace, have the same kind of interaction that we have, in person, and try and replicate that. It's never going to be the same. But I think that we should just make the best with the technology we have right now. And again, uh, I'm going back to communication. I'm going back to really listening and empathizing. That stuff. We have an opportunity to improve that, because of the constraints that we have right now. But and I think there's an opportunity to improve all of those skills. And then once we're back, once all of this ends and we're back to like in-person events, we should find that our general communication skills have improved because of these constraints. So I would again go back to the whole communication piece.
And I think that's a fair point. And it's not like you can say that in-person communication, it has advantages, it also has disadvantages. Some advantages of email or texting is you have time to think of your response. The disadvantage of that is you lose tone, like you mentioned. So there's pluses and minuses in both directions. What are some of the best tools that you have found that minimizes those disadvantages, or really just enhance productivity and connection in a remote work setting?
So I've been using Basecamp for the longest time, for 12 years. So Basecamp is I'm sure you've used it before, and a lot of your listeners will be aware of it. I think it's a pretty simple, neat tool. It's easy to use, and it sort of keeps all your messages and everything in one place. So as a basic sort of overarching tool for project communication, team communication, I think the Basecamp is a good tool. There are others as well, but this is what I use. I don't have any experience using too many other similar tools, because Basecamp has always worked for me and my team. The other thing that I've started using lately is video. So off late, I mean, last few years, video communication tools have really proliferated, and you have tools like, let's say, Loom. Loom is a tool that I came across, and then there's other tools like BombBomb, which does the same thing, where you can simply create videos, screencasts, even of yourself speaking, and then with a click of a button, just send it off to your team member or even a client, and communicate that way. So that's something that I use right now. I use a tool called Story Express, and it has a similar functionality. It's where you can shoot, create screencasts and the like. And I find it so easy. Simple. It's something that I find indispensable right now, because it also saves a lot of my time. Instead of writing a long email with my response, I can simply shoot a 2-minute video and send it off to a client and say, hey, look, this is what I meant. And especially, like we were talking earlier, if I had to take my client or even my assistant through some detailed presentation of a tool that I'd like them to use, or a specific way I'd like to use, have them use a tool. It's so easy to send instructions through such tools. So that's something that I use. I do use Slack a little bit as well for some client teams. Because they use Slack, I use Slack. That's a tool that is pretty handy as well. But I can't live without Basecamp. I can't live without my video tool, Story Express, and of course, email. I try and minimize email, but you can't live without email.
Can't live without email. I'm with you. So in that regard, so we think of Slack, Story Express, and Basecamp, as well as, of course, the email. Are there any conversations, like how do you decide when a conversation has to be done in one of those text-based tools, video-based tool, or if you're going to get on the phone and really have a in-person, real-time conversation?
Yeah, it depends on what the question is, or what the purpose or the intent of the why you're communicating. So if it's a quick response, maybe a client texts me and I have a very quick one-line response, I would just text back. But if I feel that they need proper instructions, or they're doing something which is not the right way to do something, then I would send a video, because then there's no ambiguity as to what I'm saying, and especially if I have to show something on the screen. I hardly ever take a video of myself and send it across. Nobody would like to look at my face. But but the screen is important. If I'm taking them through, let's say, if they've sent me something to review, or if I've, because I do a lot of marketing work and I do a lot of copy work, I teach them how to, write a good copy and to create offers that sell. And if I'm reviewing something, then I would share my screen and I would review them step by step. So it totally depends on what the intent is. I mean, in an ideal world, I if I could just text everybody one line, I would just do that. But it doesn't work that way. Sometimes you have to give detailed instructions and have that show them rather than tell them. And in those cases, I would use video, or even if it's email, if it's a couple of paragraphs or something which I can just quickly get it done over email, then I would do that.
So it sounds like efficiency and also probably gravity of the content that goes into that. Now, and of course, we're here at Key Conversations for Leaders, and conversations are really everything from a leadership, training development, and psychology tool. What do you think, just thinking back on your career, is there any one conversation that you feel that you either had with a client or someone who had with you that may have shaped your personal and professional career more than others?
Well, my philosophy in life in terms of learning is incremental learning. I can't recall any major conversation that has been really, really life-changing or career-changing. But I can recall a lot of, small conversations with clients and also with mentors that sort of, help me tweak and sort of improve incrementally, and really understand what it is I'm trying to achieve. Like, so for example, with clients, and also in shaping my own path in my career, in my business. As a business person, every few years you constantly have to reevaluate your offering, your positioning, and your communication. You can't just do it once and then let it go. Things change, circumstances change, markets change, industries change. So every conversation that I have with a client, I listen intently as to what their fears are and what their frustrations are and what they feel they really need. So, I can't really think of one conversation, but, every conversation, I can think of, I can't really think of all the conversations, but I know that I've had, hundreds of conversations with clients that have helped me sort of move the needle in small ways. I'm sorry, I'm not giving you that one,
No, you're doing great.
that one sort of
Yeah.
definitive story. But it's just a lot of small conversations that have helped me improve my business. I can't think of one story, if you will. Back in the day when I was helping my father in my manufacturing business, I was about 20, I think, when I started, and one day, it was a tough situation we were in. We had lots of challenges, and one day I didn't feel like going to the manufacturing plant, and so I was just hanging around at the house, and he asked me, "Why aren't you at work?" And I said, "I don't feel like it." So he just looked at me very matter of factly, and he told me very kindly, "Leave your feelings at home and please go to work." So that's something that that's probably one conversation where I always remember. Every day is different, and sometimes you don't feel like doing the things that you have to do in order to move your business forward. But feelings have to be kept separately. There's a job to do every single day, so you got to keep those feelings aside. I'm not saying you disregard your feelings, but keep those feelings aside and do what you have to do every day. Show up and do the work. So that's a conversation that I remember, and I wish I will not forget.
I love it. Thank you so much for digging deep and pulling that out. Such a great lesson as well. Thank you. And Faheem, thank you so much for spending the time with us. What's the best way for people to, get in touch with you and stay connected?
Hey, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really grateful that you took the time, and it was great having this conversation. In terms of getting in touch with me, I think the best place would be to add me on LinkedIn. Just search for my name and send me a note saying that you were on the show, and I'd love to connect with you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Faheem.
Thank you so much.
To connect with Faheem, you can find him on LinkedIn, as you said, and I'll put a link in the show notes. That's it for now. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, develop yourself, empower others, and lead by example. Thanks for listening to Key Conversations for Leaders with your host, John Ryan. If you enjoyed the show, please let us know. Give us a rating or write a review. If you have a question, you can send me an email to john@keyconvo.com. And if you haven't already, connect with me on Twitter @keyconvo or on LinkedIn under John Ryan Leadership.